All right, everyone get ready, because we are diving deep into a topic that impacts every single one of us.
Oh, yeah.
Daylight saving time.
Uh-huh.
And you guys sent in a ton of articles.
Right.
And I am so ready to unearth all the craziness about this time twisting thing.
Yeah.
From the good and the bad and just the strange.
Uh-huh.
We're going to unpack it all today.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about this topic
Yeah.
is that it all kind of boils down to our internal clocks. Like these fascinating circadian rhythms.
Okay, so you're going to have to break that down for me a little bit.
Sure.
What exactly are circadian rhythms?
So think about it this way.
Okay.
Every single cell in your body operates on this 24-hour cycle.
Oh, wow.
That's synced to the sun.
Oh.
It's like having a tiny clock in every cell. And these rhythms affect everything.
Okay.
From when you feel sleepy to when your body releases certain hormones.
So we're basically just walking, talking sundials. That's kind of wild.
In a way, yes. And the research on this is incredible.
Okay.
The Psychology Today article you sent mentions studies where volunteers were isolated without any access to sunlight.
Right.
Guess what happened?
I don't know what happened.
Their bodies settled into a natural cycle of about 25.5 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
So if we didn't have the sun telling us when to sleep and wake up,
right,
we'd all be on a slightly longer day. No wonder I always feel like I need more hours.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's why jet lag is such a drag.
Yeah.
Your body's trying to catch up to a new time zone, a new sun cycle.
Right.
But here's the thing about daylight saving time.
Yeah.
It's different.
Different how? I mean, it's just an hour shift, right?
Yeah, the difference is with jet lag, you physically travel to a new location.
Right.
So the sun's position actually changes.
Yeah.
With DST, we're manipulating the clock, but the sun's cycle stays the same.
Oh, so it's we're tricking our bodies into thinking we've traveled to a new time zone, but we haven't moved an inch.
Precisely.
Wow.
And that Psychology Today article really emphasizes the impact of this mismatch.
Yeah.
It's like being an hour off for 8 months straight. That's how long we're on DST.
Yeah.
Your body is essentially in a constant state of low-grade jet lag.
I mean, I'm starting to see why I always feel a little off during those months.
Yeah.
But honestly, I always figured it was just a bit of tiredness. Is it really more serious than that?
Much more serious, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah. The research from Johns Hopkins you provided is pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
They found that the risk of heart attacks and strokes jumps by 5% to 15%.
Wow.
In the days right after the switch to DST.
Yeah, you had no idea it could affect our health that drastically. Wow.
And the risks may be elevated throughout the entire DST period.
Gosh.
It's not just heart attacks and strokes either.
Oh, no.
The same research, along with that Psychology Today article, found connections to mental health issues as well. Well, there's an increase in emergency room visits for depression and suicide.
Oh, wow.
Along with more reports of mood disturbances and substance abuse.
No way.
It's not fully understood, but the disruption to our sleep and those circadian rhythms definitely plays a role. Sleep is so fundamental to our overall well-being.
Right.
It's no surprise that messing with it has serious consequences.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying to think that something as simple as changing the clock could have such a ripple effect on our health.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And speaking of ripple effects, that Johns Hopkins research also looked at traffic accidents. Turns out fatal car crashes increased by 6% in the days after the time change.
Oh, wow.
Drowsiness is a major factor.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that DST's effects can be deadly.
Right. Okay, so we're kind of getting a pretty clear picture of the downsides here.
Yeah.
But hold on a second. We always hear about the benefits of DST.
Right.
Like saving energy, reducing crime, boosting the economy. Are those just myths?
Well, let's take a closer look at those claims.
Okay.
The Syracuse.com article you sent actually debunks the energy savings myth.
Really?
Yeah.
I am surprised that's the main argument I always hear.
Right. But the research shows that any energy savings are negligible, like a tiny 0.03%.
Wow.
And get this. Some studies even suggest that DST might actually increase energy use in some cases.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, so much for that argument.
Yeah.
What about the reduced crime rates?
Yeah.
I've definitely heard that more daylight hours in the evening deters crime.
There's actually some truth to that claim.
Okay.
The Daylight Saving Time Pros and Cons article you provided acknowledges that having more daylight can lead to reduced crime rates.
Okay.
The logic is that criminals prefer to operate under the cover of darkness.
Right.
But there's a crucial caveat here.
I knew there had to be a catch. What is it?
So the Time article brings up a really important point.
Okay.
If we were to make DST permanent, as some people are advocating for.
Hmm.
It would mean kids in some parts of the country would be going to school in the dark.
Right.
That obviously raises serious safety concerns.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like we'd be trading one safety issue for another.
Right.
So it sounds like the energy and crime arguments are a bit more complicated than we initially thought.
Uh-huh.
What about the economic benefits?
Yeah.
Doesn't DST boost the economy?
That's a trickier one.
Okay.
The articles you sent present conflicting viewpoints.
Okay.
The daylight saving time pros and cons piece highlights some potential benefits like increased retail sales, more gas being sold, and even a boost for industries like golf and barbecue.
Right.
But other experts, as seen in the NPR and CBS News articles,
Yeah.
argue that these benefits might be overstated and don't outweigh the proven health risks.
So it's not a clear-cut win for the economy?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Some sectors might see a slight boost,
Right.
but it's definitely not a universal benefit. And when you weigh those potential gains against the very real health and safety risks we discussed,
Right.
it becomes a much more complex equation.
Okay, so if DST has all these downsides
Yeah.
and the benefits are debatable at best,
Uh-huh.
why not just stick with standard time year-round?
That's a question a lot of sleep experts and researchers are asking,
Okay.
and there's growing support for that idea.
Uh-huh.
The Seattle Met article explains that standard time actually aligns better with our natural circadian rhythms.
Okay.
And it all comes down to that morning light we talked about earlier.
Morning light. Help me connect the dots here.
Well, getting more sunlight in the morning helps us wake up naturally
Okay.
and sets our internal clocks for the day.
Yeah.
This can lead to better sleep,
Uh-huh.
improved mood, increased productivity,
Wow.
and even potentially reduce those long-term health risks we discussed.
So standard time is like giving our bodies a natural reset button each morning.
Exactly. It's about working with our biology, not against it.
I like that.
Yeah.
And speaking of biology,
Uh-huh.
let's look at how people in extreme environments handle time.
Okay.
The article about people living near the Arctic Circle blew my mind.
Right.
They have like incredibly long periods of darkness and light.
Mm-hmm.
How do their bodies cope with that?
It's truly remarkable.
Yeah.
The Psychology Today article explains that even in the darkest months, they still get some exposure to sunlight,
Okay.
even if it's just a few minutes of twilight.
Right.
And get this, even moonlight can be enough to reset our internal clocks.
Wait, moonlight? Seriously?
Yep. It turns out our bodies are incredibly sensitive to light.
Wow.
And the article also highlighted the Inuit people who maintain a regular sleep-wake cycle.
Okay.
Even without a consistent light-dark pattern, they've adapted to those extreme conditions in fascinating ways.
Okay, that is amazing. It seems like our bodies are way more adaptable than we give them credit for.
Absolutely.
Wow.
But even with that adaptability, messing with our natural rhythms has consequences, as we've seen with DST.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the U.S. and this whole permanent DST debate. Why can't we seem to make up our minds about what to do with our clocks?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, some states, like Arizona, have decided to ditch DST and stick with standard time year-round.
Right.
But at the national level, it's a much more complex issue.
Okay.
The Syracuse.com article you provided reminded us about the Sunshine Protection Act,
Right.
which aims to make DST permanent nationwide.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
So what's holding it back?
It's facing a lot of pushback, particularly from sleep experts and researchers who are concerned about the health risk we've been discussing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's another case of potential economic interests clashing with scientific evidence.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
The articles from NPR, Time, and CBS News all highlight this tension.
Right.
It really boils down to trying to balance potential economic benefits with the very real health and safety risks associated with disrupting our natural sleep patterns. And as we've discussed, the evidence strongly suggests that those health risks are significant and shouldn't be taken lightly.
Okay, well, it sounds like this DST debate isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
So until the powers that be figure things out,
Right.
what can we do to minimize the disruption to our own lives? Any tips or tricks?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm all ears. Spill the secrets.
First and foremost, prioritize sleep,
Okay.
especially in the days leading up to and after the time change.
Okay.
Aim for at least 7 hours of sleep. That's crucial.
Got it. Sleep is non-negotiable. What else?
Okay.
Yeah.
The Psychology Today and Johns Hopkins articles both emphasize the importance of getting some morning light.
Okay.
On that Sunday morning after the switch, try to get outside early, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Right.
That exposure to sunlight will help reset your internal clock.
Okay, I can definitely commit to a little morning sunshine.
Right.
Anything else?
One more helpful tip from Johns Hopkins is to gradually adjust your sleep schedule.
Okay.
By about 15 to 20 minutes, each day. In the week leading up to the time change.
Right.
It's a gentler way to ease your body into the new time instead of shocking it all at once.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've definitely been guilty of waiting until the last minute to adjust.
Yeah.
And my body always pays the price.
It's a common mistake, but even those small adjustments can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And remember, even though these tips are particularly helpful during the DST switch, they're actually good sleep hygiene practices to keep in mind year-round.
That's a really good point. I like that.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've learned about those internal clocks ticking away inside us, the surprising health risks of DST,
Right.
the myths and realities of its supposed benefits,
Yeah.
and even how people in extreme environments handle time.
Right.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been, and just like any deep dive, there's always more to explore.
Absolutely. But before we move on, let's leave our listener with something to think about.
Okay.
If we could design a time system from scratch, what would it look like?
Ooh.
What would prioritize both our health and modern life?
That's a good question.
Something to ponder.
It is.
All right. So, dear listener,
Yeah.
we encourage you to mull that over and share your thoughts.
Uh-huh.
What kind of time system would you design? Keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. You know what's really fascinating to me? It's how different cultures view and experience time.
Oh, totally. It's easy to get stuck in our own way of doing things.
Right.
But stepping back and looking at it,
Yeah.
there are so many different perspectives out there.
Exactly. For example, many indigenous cultures have a cyclical understanding of time,
Right.
as opposed to our more linear, clock-driven view.
I've read a bit about that.
Yeah.
It's like they see time as a continuous flow
Uh-huh.
with everything connected.
Precisely. Past, present, and future aren't separate compartments in that view.
Right.
They're all part of this ongoing cycle.
Yeah.
And that can influence everything from how those cultures make decisions to their relationship with nature.
Wow. It really makes you realize that our Western way of thinking about time
Right.
isn't the only way.
Yeah.
Or maybe even the best way.
Right. And there are cultures where punctuality isn't as rigid as it is in, say, Western societies.
Right.
Think about island time,
Yeah.
where things move at a more relaxed pace.
I've definitely heard stories about that.
Yeah.
So it's less about disrespecting time
Right.
and more about prioritizing relationships
Yeah.
and the present moment over a strict schedule.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In our go, go, go world,
Yeah.
it's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and just forget to slow down and appreciate the now.
I agree. It's a good reminder that even our concept of time is in many ways a social construct.
Wow.
We've created these systems to measure and manage it, but they're not absolute truth.
Okay, so we've talked about how messing with time can affect our bodies and minds.
Right.
But what about the way we work?
Yeah.
Does all this DST back and forth mess with our productivity?
It definitely can. The Daylight Saving Time pros and cons article you provided actually talks about cyberloafing.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a noticeable increase in employees wasting time on the internet the week after the spring DST switch.
Oh my gosh, I am so guilty of that. I swear, my brain feels foggy for days after the time change.
It's understandable. Your sleep-deprived brain is seeking out easy distractions to cope with the fatigue.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about the increased risk of workplace accidents.
Oh, right.
Which was mentioned in one of the research articles.
Right. That's a really sobering reminder that those effects of DST,
Yeah.
they ripple out into so many aspects of our lives.
And it's not just individual productivity either. It can affect entire industries.
Wow.
Remember that Time article that mentioned how the movie industry isn't a fan of DST?
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. People are probably less likely to go to a dark theater when it's still bright and sunny outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the airline industry has also voiced concerns.
Really?
That Daylight Saving Time pros and cons article mentioned that the Air Transport Association estimated DST cost them a whopping $147 million back in 2007.
Wow.
Due to scheduling conflicts with countries that don't observe DST.
$147 million?
Yeah.
That's a hefty price tag.
It is.
It seems like DST's impact on the economy is a mixed bag.
It is.
Some potential gains for certain businesses, but also some losses for others.
You got it. And that leads us back to the central question.
Okay.
Is it all worth it? Do the potential benefits of DST really outweigh those proven health and safety risks?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And from all this research, it seems like the answer is far from simple.
Indeed. It's a complex issue with passionate arguments on both sides.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if we could go back in time. Knowing what we know now,
Yeah.
would we have ever implemented DST in the first place?
It's an intriguing thought experiment. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say.
Right.
Perhaps if we had understood circadian rhythms back then,
Yeah.
and the importance of aligning with those natural sleep-wake cycles,
No way.
we might have chosen a different path.
Yeah. Maybe we'd be living in a world with a time system that's more in sync with our bodies,
Right.
with less emphasis on manipulating the clock to suit economic interests.
It's a fascinating possibility.
It is. Well, speaking of history,
Yeah.
let's dig into another interesting tidbit I came across.
Okay.
Did you know that Benjamin Franklin is often credited with the idea of DST,
I did.
even though it's not entirely accurate?
Right. It's one of those historical quirks. What's the real story there?
Well, it all stems from a satirical letter Franklin wrote way back in 1784
Okay.
to the editor of a Parisian newspaper.
Uh-huh.
He jokingly suggested that Parisians should wake up earlier to save money on candles.
Ah, so it was more a tongue-in-cheek observation. Right.
About people's habits.
Yeah.
Not a serious proposal.
Exactly. But somehow, over time, this satirical suggestion got transformed into Franklin being the father of DST.
Right.
Talk about a game of historical telephone.
It's a good reminder that history is often told through a specific lens.
Right?
And sometimes the truth gets a bit distorted along the way.
For sure. Speaking of the real origins of DST,
Yeah.
the Daylight Saving Time Pros and Cons article mentions that the concept we know today was actually proposed by a New Zealand entomologist named George Vernon Hudson.
That's right. His motivation was a bit more niche than Franklin's.
Okay.
He wanted more daylight hours so he could devote more time to studying insects.
Of course he did. Classic entomologist, right?
Right.
It seems like everyone has their own reasons for wanting to tinker with time.
Indeed. And that's part of what makes this whole DST debate so intriguing.
Uh-huh.
It touches on so many aspects of our lives, our biology, our psychology, our social norms, our economic systems.
Right.
It's a microcosm of the human experience in a way.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
It's definitely a topic that sparks a lot of debate
Yeah.
and makes you think about things in a whole new light.
Speaking of light,
Yeah.
I think it's time we shed some light on another fascinating aspect of this discussion.
Yeah.
The role of technology in our relationship with time.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah.
Technology has completely changed how we experience and manage time, hasn't it?
Absolutely. We're constantly connected, bombarded with notifications,
Right.
expected to be available 24/7.
Yeah.
It's like time has become compressed,
Yeah.
and we're always trying to squeeze more into it.
I feel that I'm constantly battling the clock,
Yeah.
trying to stay on top of everything. My to-do list never seems to get any shorter.
It's a common feeling in our hyper-connected world.
Right.
And technology, while incredibly useful,
Yeah.
can also exacerbate the negative effects of DST.
Right.
Think about all those devices we have to manually adjust when the time changes.
Ugh, don't remind me. It's such a pain to go through and change the clocks on everything.
Right, it's a minor annoyance, but it speaks to how deeply intertwined technology is with our concept of time.
And then there's the whole issue of blue light from our screens.
Yes.
That can really mess with our sleep, especially when we're staring at them late at night.
That's a crucial point. The blue light emitted from our phones, tablets, and computers,
Right.
it suppresses melatonin production.
Uh-huh.
That's the hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle.
Right.
So even if you're trying to go to bed at a reasonable hour,
Yeah.
that late-night screen time can make it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Yeah, it's like we're fighting a losing battle against our devices.
In a way, yes. That's why it's so important to be mindful of your technology use,
Right.
especially in the hours leading up to bedtime.
Right.
Creating a digital detox routine, dimming your screens, using blue light filters,
Right.
those can all help mitigate the negative effects.
Great advice.
Yeah,
It's easy to forget that those little screens can have such a big impact on our sleep.
they can. Now, we've talked a lot about the downsides of DST, but to be fair, there are definitely people who genuinely enjoy that extra hour of daylight in the evenings.
Oh, absolutely. I know
Yeah.
plenty of people who love those long summer evenings.
Right.
Having more time for outdoor activities, socializing, just enjoying the sunshine.
Exactly. For some, that extra hour daylight makes a big difference in their quality of life.
Totally.
It's like an extension of summer.
Right. And for those folks, the benefits of DST probably outweigh the drawbacks.
Yeah.
It really comes down to individual preferences and lifestyles.
Precisely. It's a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to this debate.
Right.
What might be a minor inconvenience for one person could be a significant health issue for another.
Right.
It's all about understanding your own body and what works best for you.
Speaking of advocating for what works best, the Daylight Saving Time Pros and Cons article mentioned some organizations that are actively involved in this whole debate.
Oh, interesting. Which ones?
There's the National Conference of State Legislatures, National Geographic, and something called the Save Standard Time campaign.
That's great. It's encouraging to see those groups working to educate the public and push for change.
Right.
It's such a complex issue.
Yeah.
And having those voices out there raising awareness is so important.
It really feels like we're all part of this giant time experiment, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what works best for humanity as a whole.
I like that analogy. And while the debate continues, we can all take steps to become more aware of our own personal relationship with time and how it affects our well-being.
Agreed. But before we wrap up this fascinating conversation, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The concept of island time.
Ah, yes. A different pace of life.
Right.
A different way of perceiving time. What sparked your interest in that?
Well, I was thinking about how, in a way, those cultures that embrace a more relaxed approach to time might actually be onto something.
Okay.
In our fast-paced, always-on world, it's so easy to lose sight of the present moment, to get so caught up in schedules and deadlines that we forget to simply be.
That's a profound observation. It's like we've become slaves to the clock.
Yeah.
Constantly striving for efficiency and productivity.
Right.
But at what cost?
And maybe those cultures that prioritize relationships and being present over strict adherence to a schedule, maybe they have a better understanding of what truly matters.
It's an important perspective to consider. Perhaps we can learn something from those cultures.
Right.
Find a way to balance our need for structure and efficiency with a greater appreciation for the present moment.
I love that idea. It's like finding this sweet spot between island time and clock time.
Right.
A way of being that honors both our commitments and our well-being.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our agency over time rather than letting it control us.
So well said.
Yeah.
So, dear listener.
Yeah.
As you navigate this crazy world of time zones, deadlines, and ever-shifting clocks, remember to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Appreciate the present moment.
I love that.
And maybe even embrace a little bit of that island time spirit every now and then.
Excellent advice.
Yeah.
And always remember, time is a precious resource, so let's use it wisely.
It's amazing how this deep dive into daylight saving time has opened up this whole conversation about our relationship with time itself.
Right.
It's like such a basic part of life.
It is.
Yet we rarely stop to really think about it.
It's true.
Yeah.
We tend to take time for granted.
Yeah.
Rushing from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
Always focused on what's coming up next.
Right.
But maybe that's part of the problem.
You think so?
I do. Perhaps we need to slow down, become more aware of how we're actually spending our time, and really savor the present moment.
There's definitely something to be said for being more present.
Right.
But it's easier said than done in our always-on world.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to, shift our mindset?
Well, there's a growing body of research on mindfulness. Okay. The practice of being fully present in the here and now, and the benefits are pretty remarkable.
Okay.
Reduced stress, improved focus, enhanced creativity.
Wow.
Even a boost to our overall well-being.
All that from just being more present. Okay, I'm listening.
The key is to cultivate a sense of intentionality with our time.
Right.
To make conscious choices about how we spend it, rather than letting it slip away unnoticed.
So it's about being more proactive with our time.
Yeah.
Instead of just reacting to whatever comes up.
Exactly. And it starts with paying attention to our own habits and patterns.
Right.
How are we currently spending our time? What activities drain our energy? What brings us joy and fulfillment?
Okay, so step one is self-awareness.
Yeah.
Taking stock of how we're actually using our time.
Right. Once you have a clearer understanding of your patterns, you can start making adjustments,
Okay.
prioritizing the things that truly matter,
Right.
and letting go of the things that don't serve you.
It's about designing a life that aligns with our values,
Right.
where we feel like our time is being spent in a way that feels meaningful.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's empowering to realize that we have more control over our time than we often believe.
So we're not just victims of the clock.
Not at all. We have the power to shape our time.
Wow.
To make it work for us.
I love that. It's like we're the architects of our own time.
Yeah.
Building a life we love, brick by brick, moment by moment.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of daylight saving time and beyond, we encourage you to embrace the power of mindful time management.
Yes.
Pay attention to your habits.
Right.
Set intentions.
Yeah.
Prioritize what truly matters. And savor those precious moments that make up your life.
Time is a gift.
Yes.
A resource to be cherished and used wisely. May you always find the time for the things that bring you joy.
Yes.
Purpose and a deep sense of fulfillment.
Thank you guys for joining us on The Deep Dive.